The midday sun blazed over a dusty highway as Emma Blake pulled into a small roadside diner. Her old, reliable sedan hummed softly before falling silent as she parked in the gravel lot. The young woman stepped out, dressed casually in jeans and a plain hoodie, her demeanor calm and unassuming. To any passerby, she looked like a typical college student on a break between classes. But what they couldn't see was the strength and discipline beneath the surface, earned from years of service in the Marine Corps. Emma had transitioned out of the military a few months earlier, trading her combat boots for college textbooks. The adjustment hadn't been easy, but she had embraced the challenge. Now studying criminology, she dreamed of continuing her service in a different capacity by joining law enforcement. Today, however, she was simply looking forward to a quiet lunch before heading back to campus. The diner was modest but welcoming, with the faint aroma of coffee and fried food wafting through the air. Emma slid into a booth by the window, ordered a burger and a coffee, and pulled out her notebook to review her class notes. The world outside seemed peaceful, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to relax. That peace was shattered when the door swung open, the sound of heavy boots and loud laughter filling the small space. A group of 5 bikers entered, their leather jackets adorned with patches and skull insignias. The Steel Vultures, as their jackets proclaimed, were known in the area for their rowdy behavior and penchant for trouble. The leader of the group, Troy, a tall, scruffy man with a smirk that oozed arrogance, scanned the diner. His eyes landed on Emma, sitting alone, focused on her notes. With a nod to his crew, he sauntered over to her booth. "Well, what do we have here?" he drawled, leaning against the table. "A little college girl all by herself?" Emma didn't look up, her pen continuing to glide across the paper. "Just here for lunch," she said simply, her tone steady but uninterested. Troy chuckled, clearly not used to being dismissed. "Come on, sweetheart, don't be shy. What's your name?" Emma set down her pen and looked up, her sharp eyes meeting his. "Not interested." The laughter from the bikers grew louder, filling the room. What Troy didn't realize, and what Emma knew all too well, was that this wasn't the first time someone had underestimated her. He had no idea who he was messing with. Troy's smirk faltered slightly at Emma's calm but firm response. He wasn't used to people, especially women, brushing him off. The other bikers, sensing his frustration, closed in around her booth, their laughter echoing through the small diner. The diner's patrons grew quieter, their eyes darting nervously toward the scene. Emma took another sip of her coffee, her movements deliberate, unhurried. She glanced at Troy, then at the others. Assess the situation, control the outcome. The principles drilled into her during her Marine Corps training surfaced instinctively. She noted their positioning, Troy leaning in too close, another blocking the exit, and the others forming a loose semicircle behind her. "I said I'm not interested," she repeated, her tone steady, almost bored. Troy chuckled, but it was forced now. "Feisty, I like that," he said, reaching out to grab her notebook. The movement was fast, but Emma was faster. Her hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with a firm grip that immediately wiped the smug grin off his face. Troy winced, trying to pull his arm back, but Emma held it in place, her fingers digging into a pressure point. "Put it down," she said quietly, her voice like steel. The entire group froze for a moment, taken aback by her unexpected strength. Troy's bravado returned quickly, though, as he yanked his arm free and slammed her notebook onto the table. "You've got some nerve, girl." Emma sighed, placing the notebook back in her bag. She stood up slowly, her gaze sweeping the group, her composure unshaken. "Here's your chance to walk away," she said, her voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable warning. The bikers burst into laughter, their confidence returning. One of them, a burly man named Hank, stepped closer, blocking her path to the exit. "What are you gonna do, sweetheart?" he sneered. "Call the cops? Cry for help?" Emma glanced at Hank, then Troy. She shifted her stance slightly, positioning herself between them, her weight balanced evenly on her feet. "I won't say it again," she said, her tone dropping. "Walk away." Troy's grin twisted into a scowl. He lunged forward, aiming to shove her back into the booth, but before he could make contact, Emma moved. She sidestepped his advance, her elbow connecting sharply with his ribs. Troy stumbled, gasping in pain, but before he could recover, Emma swept his legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. The diner erupted into chaos. The other bikers charged at her, but Emma was already in motion. Hank swung a fist toward her, but she ducked, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. With a calculated shove, she sent him sprawling into the table behind her, his weight toppling plates and silverware to the ground. Another biker reached for her bag, but Emma spun around, driving her knee into his stomach. He doubled over with a groan, clutching his midsection. A fourth biker hesitated, clearly reconsidering his choices, but the fifth wasn't as wise. He lunged at her with a chair, only for Emma to sidestep and sweep his legs out from under him, leaving him sprawled on the ground. The fight lasted less than a minute. Emma's movements were precise, efficient, each one designed to neutralize a threat quickly and effectively. The bikers, groaning and humiliated, struggled to their feet, their earlier bravado now replaced with confusion and fear. Troy, still on the floor, glared up at her, his expression twisted with anger. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Emma leaned down slightly, her sharp gaze locking onto his. "Neither did you," she replied. "Stay down." The aftermath. The diner's owner, a wiry man in his 60s named Joe, stepped out from behind the counter, a baseball bat clutched in his hands. "You all right, miss?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Emma nodded, brushing off her hoodie. "I'm fine. You might want to call the police, though." Joe hesitated, his eyes darting between Emma and the groaning bikers. "They've caused trouble around here before. Cops never seem to do much." Emma gave him a small, reassuring smile. "They'll do something this time." As Joe picked up the phone, the bikers began to retreat, dragging themselves out of the diner and back to their motorcycles. Troy, clutching his side, shot Emma a venomous glare. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice low and filled with malice. Emma didn't respond. She watched silently as the group mounted their bikes and roared out of the parking lot, their departure leaving an uneasy stillness in the air. Preparing for retaliation. Emma returned to her seat, finishing the last of her now cold coffee. The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, but her outward demeanor remained calm. She knew better than to underestimate people like Troy. Their egos couldn't handle humiliation, especially in front of their crew. Retaliation was inevitable. Joe approached her cautiously, wiping his hands on his apron. "You should be careful," he said, his tone serious. "They don't let things go easily. They've caused real harm to folks around here." Emma looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "I can handle them." Joe frowned but didn't press further. "If you need help, you come find me. This town doesn't need more trouble." Emma thanked him and stepped outside, scanning the parking lot. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the quiet road. She retrieved her bag from the car and rummaged through it, pulling out her phone and checking the time. She had a few hours before nightfall, plenty of time to prepare. She wouldn't go looking for trouble, but if it came for her, she'd be ready. The retaliation. That night, as Emma predicted, the steel vultures returned. The rumble of their motorcycles shattered the peaceful silence of the diner's parking lot. This time, there were more of them, at least a dozen, and they weren't interested in posturing. They circled the lot like wolves, their headlights casting eerie beams across the gravel. Emma stood by her car, her stance relaxed but alert. Her mind raced through the potential scenarios, calculating her next moves. The bikers dismounted, their expressions dark and determined. Troy stepped forward, his hand resting on a crowbar tucked into his belt. "You made a big mistake today," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "And now, you're gonna pay for it." Emma tilted her head slightly, her calm gaze never leaving his. "You think you can scare me?" she asked, her tone even. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Troy smirked, gesturing for his crew to move in. "Let's find out." The parking lot erupted into chaos as the steel vultures descended upon Emma, their aggression fueled by anger and bruised egos. But Emma remained calm, her Marine training sharpening her focus. The bikers thought they had the upper hand with their numbers, but they were no match for her discipline, precision, and tactical awareness. As Troy swung his crowbar, Emma sidestepped with ease, grabbing his wrist and twisting it sharply. The crowbar clattered to the ground, and with a swift elbow to his ribs, she sent him stumbling backward, gasping for air. Another biker charged from behind, but Emma spun and swept his legs out from under him, leaving him sprawled on the gravel. The fight was fast and intense. Emma moved like a whirlwind, using every advantage the environment offered. She used a nearby car door to deflect a blow, a loose piece of wood as a makeshift weapon, and even the gravel beneath her feet to trip her opponents. Each movement was deliberate. Every strike aimed to incapacitate without unnecessary harm. The bikers, despite their numbers, were outmatched by her skill and composure. A turning point. Within minutes, the bikers were either on the ground groaning in pain or retreating to the edges of the parking lot. Their leader, Troy, staggered to his feet, his face twisted in rage. "You think you've won?" he spat, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "This isn't over." Emma stepped toward him, her posture steady and commanding. She didn't need to shout to command respect. Her presence alone was enough. "It's over when you walk away and don't come back," she said, her voice firm but calm. "You've been given more chances than you deserve." Troy glared at her, but the weight of his failure was evident in his hunched shoulders and hesitant movements. The other bikers, seeing their leader defeated, began retreating to their motorcycles, murmuring amongst themselves. The bravado that had fueled their earlier harassment had evaporated, replaced by fear and embarrassment. The aftermath. As the bikers roared off into the night, the parking lot fell silent once again. Emma stood alone, her breathing steady as she surveyed the scene. The faint hum of sirens in the distance signaled the arrival of the police, likely called by a concerned diner patron. When the officers arrived, they found Emma standing calmly near her car, unscathed. Witnesses quickly vouched for her actions, describing how she had defended herself with remarkable skill and restraint. The officers nodded respectfully as they took statements and assured Emma they would pursue the gang. A quiet victory. Before leaving, the diner's owner, Joe, approached Emma. His eyes were wide with admiration and gratitude. "You really took care of them," he said, his voice filled with relief. "This town owes you one." Emma gave a small smile and shook her head, just doing what needed to be done. As she climbed into her car and started the engine, Emma took one last look at the diner. The world was quiet again, at least for now. She knew the steel vultures wouldn't forget her, but she wasn't worried. If they came back, she'd be ready. Driving away into the night, Emma felt a sense of calm wash over her. She wasn't just a college student or a Marine veteran. She was someone who stood up for what was right, no matter the odds. And that, she knew, was the greatest victory of all.